So everybody, call the meeting to order. We won't do the Pledge of Allegiance. We don't have a flag, but just so there's an official start time and everybody's here. Let's start with any questions that anybody has on materials or emails that we've had going back and forth in between members. And thank you for following the open meeting laws. That's been very helpful. But any questions from anybody before we get started?
I just have
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
just a question, and it's me once again. When you talk about sources of funds, and this might come up as you go forward, and you talk about the sources of funds for capital projects, you talk about the tax levy, and then you talk about the revenue, surplus revenue. What's the difference in those two? I mean, the tax levy is just, and then there's the enterprise funds balances. What is the tax levy relative vis-a-vis? Is it a special tax approval for one particular thing in the expenses and the capital expense?
The tax levy is this year's monies. It comes from what we're estimating for the upcoming year in terms of the budget. So it's from the taxes, it's from the local receipts, it's from the state aid.
Okay, but then, so how's that differ? But that's not a line item in the expense budget for next year. Am I correct?
It's based on our estimates of what the revenues are going to be. So it's based on the upcoming budget year. We make an estimate of revenue.
Okay, here's
and so from that estimate of revenue, we are taking a certain amount of money for tax levy to cover the budget and a certain amount of money to cover a few capital items.
So that must reduce the surplus.
The surplus revenue is basically it's also known as free cash. The state calls it free cash. It's the surplus from the year before.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah,
Jeff, go ahead.
so I had the same question, Greg. When it says tax levy, if you're taking that out of the tax receipts, then that should come off on your statement of revenue and expenses. It should come off as a line item either in the expenses or off the revenue. But you're showing surplus at 3 million or 2.6 million or something. I don't see where the tax levy for the capital expenditures is coming out of there as a source.
We're not showing the only capital we've been showing in the source and use is the capital coming out of the tax levy. We have not been.
I don't see it. So you're saying the $1,668,000 in the spring warrant, the $1,668,000 coming from tax levy is going to show up as a reduction of the surplus on your revenue and expenses in the general fund?
If you go to, do you have the financial projections? I
have the financial summary that shows the 95 million of revenue and 91 million of expenses.
Is this?
No, that's fine. Don't use that.
Yeah, so Jeff.
Why?
Jeff, if you read the email that came out, there's two things that were drafts that we're going to consider using. One is the letter and the other is the financial summary. Both of those they came from Beppy and Brian as a tool for us to use, but they're in draft form.
I'm looking at the financial summary, right?
Yeah,
that financial summary won't show it. And then that was one of I need to talk to Beppy about. She's not showing a lot of items because
that's okay.
Not every.
But my question can be answered. So my question can still be answered by the financial summary. You're saying that the $1,668,000 of tax levy is going to come out of that $3.4 million surplus. That's on the financial summary I'm looking at.
I'm sorry. I'm not.
I was emailed the financial summary.
Here, let me show you what I'm looking at. Okay, I just can't.
This is an April 22nd email that had.
Yeah, I did not create that.
I made that. He did not.
I did not create that. So.
Okay, so can you answer?
Yeah.
Can you answer the question?
Just one second here. Let me show you.
Surplus is the same as free cash, basically, right?
Yeah, surplus is the
right.
same as free cash.
Right, that I knew. I didn't understand the tax levy as a source of revenue, a source of funds.
Okay, so the tax, here, I'm trying to, 1 second here. Okay, E, and then,
So Greg, can you just answer the question conceptually?
Let me try to state what I think is happening. We show, let's just say it's approximately $95 million in revenues that you're projecting for next year. And we're now projecting about 91 million of expenses. Let's just say that's where we're starting. That's operating expenses. What you have to add to that, is my understanding, is a certain amount of capital expenses that you're expecting to get from the tax levy, which might be, I can't remember how much it is in the total here.
We are, yes, we are adding another 374,416 from capital through the tax levy.
Okay, so in effect, you're saying it's not the operating budget of 91 million something. Let's just say 90 million 5. Add to that another 350,000 that you're going to take from next year's tax revenues for capital. Your total expense.
Yes,
okay.
And there are a bunch of other items as well you got to add.
Thank you. We have to know what those are. That's great.
I'm not following.
A rainy day.
Well, I'm trying to, it's hard when I can't show you stuff. So 1 second.
Well, what I'm asking, Greg, is the warrant says 1,668,000 of capital expenditures coming from the tax levy. That's right off the warrant. What's the 1,668,000 coming from?
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, that number, oh God.
Let's just say it's 1 million, Greg. Let's just say, where is it coming from?
Okay.
What?
All right. I believe you're looking at, and I do apologize for this. The Article 6 was sent on, I guess it was Wednesday, is incorrect. That number should read 374,416.
All right.
Okay, hold on. Article 6. Article 6.
All right. And that's, so that same question, that comes out of the current year's tax revenue.
Comes out of fiscal 21 tax revenue.
Yeah.
So
in your financial summary, you're saying $67 million of revenue from real estate taxes. 300,000 of that's being used for the capital expenditure, or 370 or whatever the number.
Yes, although the term tax levy is broad enough to include local receipts.
Sure.
Okay, that's fine.
It's coming out of our estimated revenue for next year.
That's the only capital expenditure coming out of current year revenue, right?
That is correct.
Can we just ask one more question with that? Why is some of it, when you still expect to have some kind of surplus next year, why do you just put a portion of it in there and the rest from previous year's surpluses? Is that any?
Because we have historically funded those items year after year after year. We fund them every single year. They're part of, if you will, they kind of fall in between capital and operating. So we treat them as capital, but we fund them as operating.
Thank you. They're a certain type of expense. I get it.
Yeah, so they're basically built, even though they're a form of capital, they're both built into both the police and the school budget. A lot of communities actually fund it in the operating. So we just so happen to fund it through capital.
Okay, Jeff, I'm going to give you a chance. Hopefully we're not going to go too far into the weeds.
No, just another question. Your free cash, the free cash as of 1/1/19 is about $6 million.
Yes.
You're going to at some point show us how all of that is being appropriated?
Well, the vast majority of that has already been spent.
Okay, well, then you don't have to do it now, but at some point I'd like to see a reconciliation of where that 6 million of free cash went.
yes, I can do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a
Any other
question.
questions?
Jerry?
Yes.
Yeah, can I ask?
Yep.
Yeah, I was looking at in the packet, the role of finance committee, and there was a line in there that really kind of caught my attention. And it says, the budget before town meeting is the finance committee's, and it is their job to explain and defend it. That really kind of surprised me, because my understanding was that we voted on the budget, and we had input on the budget, but the budget was just our recommendation. In other words, the budget was presented, and if we didn't agree, we could disagree or agree. So that kind of surprised me. I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
Well, Bob, I can clarify that a little. I'd always, that document is from, I think, where is it? Arlington. So they drafted that in Arlington, but I always say, for me, particularly when in doubt, I always go to the town charter.
Yeah.
And in the town charter, they have a budget process, and it kind of articulates the finance committee's role. And it's similar to that. And I think I can email that to everyone, and you can read that as well. It's not, it's really a kind of an oversight committee, a review, and then to kind of go through the process you're going through.
Okay.
But that's the one I think, that's what we fall back on. But you'll see there's similarities, but it's not the finance committee's responsibility to present the budget. And I'll send you these two documents tonight.
The
Okay.
finance committee, this came up when Mike was on the finance committee, and he had a concern about, he had a feeling that the select board was putting the budget together and then giving it to the finance committee, and it was clarified that that's not the case. I think, for me, I can say that I rely on Greg's gathering of the information and putting that together in the proposed budget, and that's what we use, and then we go through a process of recommending, not recommending, etc. I think my understanding of the finance committee is we are the watchdog for the budget for the town. We're the advisor to the town meeting, and we're supposed to be presenting what we think is fiscally sound and long-term sustainable.
Okay. And then we're going to work on the warrant tonight and do some votes, but the draft of the letter, which is really an excellent letter, to town meeting. Are we going to talk about that?
I think we should. It would be good if we could get started on both of those things, because we've been talking since I've been on about doing the warrant with the cover letter. Okay. I had Lou and then Janine. Lou?
Yeah, Brian did a real nice job of challenging a lot of items in the warrant. And, for several years, the town has been pretty well flush and able to meet it, get some extra stuff that they didn't need, or absolutely. Has there been a review of every department on capital that they really need, or are they just used to getting it? Can they go a year or two but fixing a playground here or doing something over there in order to make the balance of the budget?
Mm-hmm.
And get what we absolutely need, and then get some that like to have things pushed off to the side.
Mm-hmm. Good question. Janine?
I'm just going to go back to the role of the finance committee document. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we going to adopt something like that? Was that the point of sharing that document?
Oh, no, that document comes from the
Right.
finance, but we have our own set of policies, and that's very similar to our own. It's already been adopted. It was just a reminder, because there were some questions at our last meeting about what is the role of the finance committee.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was new. We were draft again.
Nope, just for your reading pleasure.
Okay.
Any other questions or?
Can we just have, Greg, can you just point your screen down a little bit so I can see your face?
Okay.
There you go. I'm just seeing your nose and your eyes,
So we don't have presentations tonight. The school committee's going to present next Tuesday. I asked Buddy to send his CPC information, which I forwarded to you. So we should, I don't see any reason that we can't get started with the warrant. Anybody, how do other people feel about that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay.
No time like
So
the
do
present.
you want to just start right off with number 1?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll read it. Article 1, Community Preservation Committee, Administrative Budget. This is a routine article. It comes every year in our budget. It's to see if the town will vote to appropriate from fiscal year 2021 community preservation annual revenues in the amount of $35,000 for administrative expenses as referenced in the community preservation fiscal year 2021 budget. Any questions on that?
I'll move that we accept Article 1.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, thank you. And for new people, any questions on community preservation or, no? Oh, screen change.
Gloria.
Can you see my screen?
We can.
Yeah.
So I took the liberty to write some recommendations. I just took, if they were the same as last year, I just copied. Can you read it?
Yes.
Yes.
This article appropriates Community Preservation Act revenues for CPC administrative functions in accordance with state law.
Okay. So we have a motion and it's seconded. Any questions or clarification?
Just so I'm clear, this is appropriating their own revenue. This isn't coming out of general fund revenue.
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, if no questions, then
Let's vote.
let's vote. All in favor? Now, do we have to do a roll call because this is Zoom, or can we?
I think what Brian Cruz has recommended with the planning board is to do a roll call vote.
Okay, so let's be the Brady Bunch and start with Janine.
I vote to adopt it.
You vote yes. Okay, I vote yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
Gloria?
Yes.
Beppy?
Yes.
And Brian? Okay. All in
You know,
favor?
I think there's something that you can actually do meeting settings, you can actually do we can all hit a button and say hands up or hands down, but that maybe we should do that for another time. In Zoom, you actually can, just
Oh,
kind
if
of,
you do reactions, you can do a thumbs up.
if you.
Oh, yeah, I just did it. See my screen?
Okay, let's try it.
How did you do that? Is there a thumbs down though?
There's no thumbs down.
How did you do it?
Media thinks we're doing a good job. They're giving us a hand.
That's pretty
I can't
cool.
remember how to do it. You go to participants and you go to.
No,
the
you go to
bottom.
reactions.
Reaction.
Reaction button.
Oh, reactions.
Yeah.
Oh, you can also
How
clap.
about this one?
Very
That's a
good.
clap.
Oh, that's nothing. All right.
That's a clap.
Yeah, there we go.
So we won't be able to do thumbs down. I guess we'll just do a thumbs up, or if there is nothing, we'll say that's a no. Good.
Lotus did it. It went like this.
Perfect. All right, number 2, Article 2. Ready to move on?
Yeah.
Take your thumb down. Take your thumb down.
Community Preservation Committee upon Agansett Playground renovations to see if the town will vote to appropriate $200,000 from fiscal year 2021 community preservation annual revenue to the town of Dartmouth Parks and Rec Department for upon Agansett Playground renovations, all in accordance with the terms and conditions of the Community Preservation Memorandum of Understanding and referenced in the Community Preservation fiscal year 2021 budget. Now, to Lou's question about what could we defer to the future, I will say that this is an article that we have asked as a finance committee, not this particular, but we have asked Parks and Rec to budget routinely for these maintenance issues on the playgrounds, because they have to meet ADA specifications, and in the past they waited and did kind of as needed, and it got to be very difficult to manage. So that, Greg, would you add anything to that?
We have certain legal requirements that we need to meet in terms of their condition, and if we don't do this, we will violate some of the laws regarding playgrounds.
Because I do think Lou's question is a good question, but I'm not sure that this is one of them that we could delay. Go ahead, Lou.
I'm just questioning whether somebody is evaluating each one of these in this year's context as a prize as compared to the last 5 years. Automatically, 200,000 will show us the appraisal, show us the bid, whatever it is. It's like,
I know that Tim said, when we asked Tim Lancaster to start to budget for this in his budget, this was a few years ago, he explained that he goes out and does routine inspections of every playground, and they don't fix every playground every year, but they have them on a schedule because there's certain things that have to be done on a schedule to keep them up to par. So I'm assuming that this is one of those things. I'm not thinking that this is fluff. We could certainly ask him, but go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I just want to point out the equipment there has been there since 1996. So it's been there a long, long time.
Yeah, I think, Tim was saying that the certifications and the safety requirements change with the playground equipment. So it's supposed to last, I think, 10 or 15 years, but the requirements change. Maybe they're supposed to last 15 or 20, but he says every 10 years they need to be replaced just because of the certification and safety requirements are changing.
Okay.
So he's trying to put them on a 10-year cycle now.
So to Lou's point, can we assume as a finance committee that in these requests, these capital requests, that there's been a level of vetting that prioritized what's in here, that these are not things that we could do without?
There has definitely, again, it went through the capital planning committee. In the case of Upon-A-Gansett, half of it's getting funded by capital and half of it's through the CPA. So both were vetted through those various committees.
Okay.
And we did start this process last year with Russell Mills Playground, which is now in the process of being upgraded. Again, codes and certifications have changed such that putting wood chips in is no longer a viable solution for the future.
Okay, Adam and then Beppy.
A couple of questions. Well, one, it hasn't been vetted. When was it vetted? Was it vetted since March 1st? Because I feel like any conversation about priorities prior to March 1st is irrelevant. And as far as, what is the actual, you said that we might be in violation of some laws. That's important to know if that's true or not. But also, that playground cannot possibly have been there since 1996. We've seen it be worked on since then. I'd like to know what the priority, what the urgency is of this. If it is, that's great. If not, I think every single type of this project needs to be looked at in the current environment that we're in.
Yeah, can I just say something?
Okay.
It says in the package that we got that the current playground equipment was originally installed in 1996 and has outlived its useful 10-year life. So maybe there's been working on it, but it was originally installed in 1996.
Yeah, I think what's happened since then is they may have put in wood chips as part of trying to extend the ability of use of that playground. But now we're putting in rubber, rubberized
ground.
which replaces the wood chips, plus obviously all the equipment gets replaced as well. Could I just address something very quickly? And we kind of touched upon it, and I was kind of trying to see if I could get something online. It's important you understand that where free cash comes from. Free cash is from surpluses from prior years. So the free cash, in this case, you're right now voting on the CPA component, but the other half of it is being funded through free cash. So you're not using revenues from this year to fund. we will be having another certification of free cash coming up for July 1, 2020. And that is the monies that I think we have to be very careful about. But you're dealing with monies basically going back a few years. Our budget is not such that it relies on those monies, and nor should it, because you should not be using non-reoccurring monies to pay for reoccurring expenditures. So, you know, speaking for myself, and I think Sean, I think we can be comfortable in use of prior year surplus monies to fund capital. What we need to do for the future is we may need to tone down our capital plan for the future. But we're right now not using our current monies other than that 370. There is a lot we can do in terms of cutback involving future monies that will come available to the town.
Okay, a couple more people, Gloria and then Jack. Gloria.
So Greg, to that point then, so let's say we, like I kind of agreed with Adam. I wanted to know when this got vetted, but to your point, let's say we don't use, let's say we want to be very conservative and not use those funds for all the capital. If there's excess there in that surplus cash from previous year, what would happen to that excess that's not used for capital?
It would carry over into next year's certified free cash number.
So
Not
then
not the CPA funds, right?
No, not the CPA.
We're talking about the CPA funds here with that 200 cents.
I brought up free cash because half of the
Right.
total cost of that project's 400 and 200's coming from free cash. But the CPA funds are very specific to where they can be used. So they cannot be used if there's a budget crisis for the town. CPA monies cannot assist in that budget crisis.
If I could expand on Gloria's point, I'm looking at the other revenue sources that you sent out about a month ago.
Yes.
A detail. So the CPA funds at the beginning of 7/1/19 were about $1.6 million in retained earnings or in fund balance, and they get about $1 million of revenue on that in a year, and then whatever they spend, and they build up a pretty large fund balance. My question is a procedural question: how much of the revenue, which is about $1 million that the CPA fund gets, how much do we appropriate and how much don't we appropriate? Because we're only appropriating about 300,000 on these warrants, right? 200 plus 180 plus 35, right? In 1, 2, and 3, we're appropriating those three things. What happens to the rest? We don't appropriate the rest of it?
First of all, they typically hear requests both in the spring and the fall.
Right.
So keep in mind for this upcoming year, they still have the fall. But they're very dependent on what people request. This year, they did not have many requests for the money. They have, some of their reserves have whittled down. So should they not appropriate, this gives them an opportunity to build up some of their reserves for future projects. And keep in mind, stuff like, say, land protection, you never know what properties come up and when, and some of them can be extremely expensive. So
just as a comment, I think it's important for this group to put in context when we do these appropriations, what the funds or whether it's a fund or one of the sewer funds or whatever, what they're looking at in terms of fund balances and revenue and total expenses, so we can get an idea of how those funds are sitting. Right? Just a thought.
Okay.
Epi.
Live and learn. On the summary page of your capital improvement plan, it says the fiscal year 21 request is from the enterprise funds 3.5 million, and in total 9.3 million or 9.4 million approximately. Your recommendations are for the enterprise funds 2.6. Oops, my eyes aren't that good. 2.6 or 2.5. 2.5, and from all the rest, a total of 4, so you're only recommending another 2 million from all other sources. Is that correct? I'm looking at,
What are
Okay.
you looking at?
you said the fiscal year 21 through 25 capital plan, improvement plan,
Oh,
And I'm-
okay.
last page, that says
Okay.
what the request was, and then what you're recommending for this spring.
Yep.
And bottom line, the total, just for what it's worth, is 9.4 of requests, and you're recommending 4.5.
Yeah.
Some of enterprise, some of that. Which would suggest to me you're expecting to make another recommendation next fall.
That is
Uh-oh.
correct. We
Every-
vote both in the spring and in the fall. We try to gear the fall
Thank you.
toward free cash. So to answer your
Okay.
question, to follow up quickly, we still, we will be certified free cash as of July 1, 2020. I'm expecting that number will be in the millions of dollars, even under the worst case scenario. That's the money that I think we're gonna have to be
Tougher on.
judicious with,
Thank you.
depending on where the finances lead us.
So in other words, in terms of the context, the ones you are recommending in this column, in the total, are the ones that you think are the more higher priorities. Is that correct?
What is in there are projects which were identified as they were important they wanted to get them done earlier in the summer. So they're geared toward projects that we were gearing toward the summer and earlier.
So
They
it
were-
was more about timing.
I understand how we get off, but we need to come back to the article that we're voting on. So
Can I just- One more thing. This is from the community preservation revenues. Where do they get their revenues from?
They get their revenues mainly from, there's a surcharge on the taxes. I believe it's 1.5%. So there's a dedicated surcharge on everyone's tax bill.
Thank you.
Also,
Got
the state provides a match of, I think it's about 15%. It used to be 100%, but
Plus, I got $1.5 million fund balance.
yes.
So
Plus
everybody started using
they have reserves they can tap into.
Okay, thank you.
any
But-
other
but-
questions?
I'm sorry, one more. But in approving this 200,000, we are in effect committing another 200,000 from the general revenues. Is that correct?
No,
I mean, from the general funds. No?
You
no,
would have to
Yeah.
vote that as part of the capital.
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
Yeah.
my understanding is we're allowing that fund, the CPA, to use their revenue for capital purposes. Isn't that what this is doing?
That
That's
is what
correct. For
this article is doing that. However,
Right, has nothing to do with the general fund.
Well,
I
the
think you
reason
could
we
be
get off
doing
on the
200
other
more.
track was that it is connected to another capital project, and that's why we started heading in that direction.
Jeff, the project is in total 400,000. This article is for
I get it.
200. So
But
yes,
what
the
we've
other
been talking about has nothing to do, Article 1, 2, and 3 have no impact on the general
that
fund.
is correct. That is correct.
Thank you. Okay.
I make a motion
Would
that
never
we,
approve Article 2
we
without
approve Article
having
2.
matching 200,000.
Okay, so we, second? Okay, all in favor, ready?
Still getting used to this.
Oh, where's my thing? Where's my thumb?
Too high.
There we
Yeah.
go.
There you go,
So,
Lou.
Adam, you
Where is it?
abstain, or you,
Oh, I lost my thumb.
I can't see, the screen changed, I'm sorry. Adam, do you abstain, or are you not voting?
I'll abstain. I don't have that. I don't have enough information.
Okay, so that is 8 in favor, Greg?
Yep.
1 abstention. Woo! Good discussion, though. That was a good discussion. Okay, Article 3.
Wait, can you please read the,
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yep. This article appropriates Community Preservation Act open space and rec funds for the replacement of the existing playground equipment, which has outlived its useful life of 10 years. The new equipment will bring the playground into current ADA compliance and safety standards, etc. everybody okay with that language? Any
Yes.
change? Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Gloria. Article 3. We're doing great. Community
Woohoo.
Community Preservation Committee FY 2021 Community Housing and Historic Preservation Reserve. To see if the town will vote to appropriate or reserve for later appropriation monies from fiscal year 2021 Community Preservation annual revenues in the amount of $180,000 as referenced in. To be allocated $90,000 for community housing, $90,000 for historic preservation. Questions? Well, let's have a motion to approve first.
So moved.
So moved.
So
Second.
moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Discussion.
Who seconded, please?
Yeah, Lou.
Lou. Thank you.
Question, sorry. This says from the revenues, the 2021 revenues. What are the chances those revenues could be lower than we anticipate?
It's always possible. It's always possible. I mean, typically, we're pretty good in our revenue assumptions, but it is always possible.
Well, I think to comment on that, even if people don't pay their bill, the revenue is still expected. So it's not whether or not it's collected or not, right? So is that your concern, Beppy? Is that
No,
people may?
if we don't collect it, we're committing to things we haven't collected. So what?
But they have to
CPA
make,
revenue.
but they have to make their 10%. They have to set aside funds 10%
Sure.
for
But what if-
on a
what
yearly
if- what if the-
basis.
What if the 10% is, I'm sorry, but what if the 10% isn't enough? I mean, doesn't cover what we're committing to here. It maybe it's 10% swamps it.
Oh, they got $1 million of annual revenue roughly. At least $1
From-
million of annual revenue, and they got $1.5 million fund balance at CPA.
Oh, never mind.
There's no way they're gonna not be.
Okay.
able to fund this.
Okay, thank you.
This
Thank
is just
you.
housekeeping.
Thank you.
Okay,
Moving right along.
any other questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Yay!
Everybody's good.
There's
Jeff,
Oh, wait a minute, I screwed up. Wait a minute. There we go.
here we go. 9-0. Let's see what the language says. This appropriation, which is, oh no, this article reserves Community Preservation Act revenues for community housing. Pretty straightforward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next article. Cemetery sale. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to appropriate and transfer the sum of $2,000 from the cemetery sale of lot fund to be spent on cemetery purposes in accordance with. Motion to approve.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay, I heard Beppy second. Who moved it?
Adam.
Adam. So Adam and then Beppy.
No questions.
No question. No questions.
Keep my mouth shut.
Does anybody want to know the size of the cemetery lot, sale of lot fund?
We don't.
No.
Beth. All in favor?
We ought to be learning this stuff, guys. We ought to be learning this stuff.
I know.
One
Thank
thing
you.
he's talking about millions of dollars, and then he's talking about nothing. Okay. Back to
Unbelievable.
Article 5. Appropriation, no, I'm sorry, establish FY 2020 maximum spending limit for revolving funds. And this is so that we can keep some activities going. I know that Greg will do a better job of explaining this than me, but it's to see if the town will vote pursuant to Mass General Law to determine the maximum spending limits in FY 2020. Is it 2020 or 2021?
21, we're voting.
For the following revolving funds, the purposes of which are detailed in, and to the cemetery, recreation, and park revolving fund, and the library revolving fund for loss and damages. The biggest amount, obviously, is recreation and park revolving fund. So let's move it. Any,
I'll move it.
Bob and second? Janine seconded. And now discussion. Anybody have questions?
These funds are there whether we use them or not. It's not like it's something we won't get. So it's easy to say yes.
Well,
If
they
the
need
funds
this,
aren't there, we can't spend it.
right.
Right.
But there are there should be available funds to spend these amounts. But again, it's just allowing the spending limit, not actually what we're spending.
Right. Okay, if there's no questions, let's take a vote.
So move. Yes.
Take your thumb.
Excellent.
It doesn't work.
Okay, and then it looks like it's unanimous. Is that correct? Okay.
Okay, Terry, 1 second. I need to,
Language.
1 second. How did we vote on number 3? Was it unanimous or did someone abstain?
No, it's
Unanimous.
unanimous. Yeah.
It was, everyone voted for it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then Article 5, this article puts caps on the amount of money that can be spent in various revolving accounts. And then it goes on to explain each one. I'm fine with that language. Anybody have anything to add? No?
To Greg.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't see how the recreation and park revolving funds have anywhere near the money to cover $185,000. I mean, maybe to look at later. We don't have to do it now, but I don't see how they can possibly, unless that's just a maximum. That's not what they're planning to spend. That's just the max they want to put on.
That's the maximum. They're gonna get fees.
That's the maximum, and keep in mind, it's also based on what they take in next year as well. So
Yeah, but their annual revenue doesn't look like that much. It looks like maybe $100,000 to $110,000 from what the sheets are that you sent out.
Is there going to be an impact this year, Greg, because of social distancing on what they can do with the beaches? What if they can't open the beaches?
Yeah.
it's
this
quite
is-
possible that will have an impact on the bucket, which is a major portion of this. So.
Yeah, can I just say something? I talked to Tim, and I mean, they're in a real quandary because, you know, are they going to have the ability to sell beach passes? Half the people, their turnover on like lifeguards is 50% because kids graduate and they move on, and they usually have another 50% of newer kids come in. But the problem is the certification courses that they need to take are not available. And so he's at this point kind of sweating it out because he may not have enough lifeguards, and
Wow.
and it may have a big impact on the bucket, especially when, you know, like the concert series. They get a lot of their money from the concert series. So but this is just the maximum that he can spend. So it's not, they're only going to spend money for what they need for food and supplies. That's really what it comes down to.
They cannot deficit spend. So that is not allowed by law.
So any of those situations that we just talked about aren't going to impact this article? Okay. Any other questions or discussion on that? Okay, should we take a vote?
So move.
Agree.
Oh, we did.
We did. Okay, that was just a question after the fact. All right. Article 6.
Do we want to skip Article 6 and come back to it, or?
We sure do. Thank you, Bob.
Good point.
All right.
I do, that's for sure.
All right.
Article 7. This is an easy one. Salaries and stipends of elected officials.
Poof.
Go ahead. Was somebody going to say something?
No.
To see if the town will vote to fix the salary of the following elected officer of the town as provided in Mass General Law. Town clerk, FY 2020 was 78,814. FY 2021, 80,370. Now there's a question mark.
Yeah. What is the question mark?
Well, I would use that number for now. I assumed a 2% increase. I talked to Sean about it, so that's what we're assuming for now is a 2%.
Okay.
What about the what about level funding? I don't follow that.
It's the town clerk salary.
Well, again, if you look at what other positions have already been contractually, what's been negotiated, this is consistent with that. So
This is a negotiated contract?
this is
No,
not a negotiated
town clerk is not,
contract.
no.
But typically, her salary goes up consistent with what's been negotiated elsewhere.
I just think you ought to have an extra, if you're gonna do level budgeting, I think you ought to have and you want to increase the clerk, you better have an explanation as to why you should do that. That's all.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Greg was alluding to it. So there's contracts for a number of the staff. Actually, all of the staff. So they're either a collective bargaining unit or individual contracts. The town clerk is just elected, so that position does not. So this is why it's in here. The other ones are just covered under the either the collective bargaining contracts that have been agreed upon or their personal contracts. So they're not level funded. They're all getting.
People's understanding, a few years ago, the Finance Committee had a discussion about the potential of changing this to an appointed position rather than an elected position. And that would be quite an involved process. But one of the reasons it was considered is that it didn't seem fair to people that this position would be treated differently than all the other employees of the town. It just is because it's elected. So that's a conversation for another day. But,
It would involve a charter change.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a few things that would involve a charter change that might be good for us, but.
Well, I can only say that this year is the 10th year, so we've been starting to pull together information on a charter review committee to present to the select board.
Oh, good.
So that is going to come. We're a little behind now, but it's probably going to come up later this spring to the board and see how they want to approach it. There's a few different ways, but we can cover that as we get closer.
Okay.
Question? Yeah, again, I'm sorry. As a new person, I've been sort of surprised by in the Schedule A, when you break it down, how much is for compensation, how much for other expenses or salaries, there's some people whose salaries go up and many whose salaries don't go up, or some cases the salary line goes up. Is that all based on collective bargaining and or a compensation review that you have done?
The reason you're looking at Schedule A and some salaries are going up and others are not is because that we have a combination of non-union employees and union employees. Right now, all the contracts are open. A number have been negotiated. That is funded in its own article, which is later in the warrant. The reason we fund it separate from Schedule A is because that needs to be approved in order for the contract to go into effect. So when you look at Schedule A, you have to add on the monies that are appropriated. I believe it's Article, I think it's like Article 19.
Okay, let me try this again. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm bit by bit understanding this. So when I look at your Schedule A and it ends up again at $91 million, does that include the salary increases, or is that a separate line later?
It only includes the salary increases for contracts that have already been ratified. Non-union agreements do not involve the need for town meeting approval. However, collective bargaining agreements as settled by the town do involve the need for town meeting vote.
So if you were this is not unlike the capital expenses that we're committing to now. I mean, we've committed to 300 and something thousand. If you say, can you just jump ahead and then we'll come back. I'm sorry. How much is the total amount that we are going to be committing to? You said it's in warrant something or article something? Article 19?
Article 6? Are you talking about Beppy?
No,
One second. In Article,
Article 17.
is it 17? Yes, it's 17.
So
So
Article 17,
so
we are-
currently, we have 2 contracts that have been settled in that warrant. And you can see the numbers that are there. Keep in mind, this covers 2 fiscal years because fiscal year 20, which we're in, has yet to be settled. But for fiscal year 21, it is 122,000 for one, and in the other, it's 442,708 for the other. And there are 2 other union agreements that are in the process of being negotiated, so there will be additional numbers added should those be settled.
okay, let me try to see if I understand this, and thank you. So when you say now, in your Schedule A, the total number is 91 million something. There, Schedule A, let's just say 91.5. You're saying now we have to add to that the capital that we're committing to, which is 300 and something, and add to that this compensation of about whatever it is, 500,000. Is that true?
That's true, but you also have to, there are a bunch of
And
other.
others. And there are others. I got it. But I'm trying to, if we're the finance committee, we're committing to not just the 91.5 or whatever it is, but we're committing to a lot in a total. I want to be able to get it, so we're totaling this at some point and tell the town we're committing 91 of the, and then we're committing on top of that. So with the total amount of commitments from next year's revenues is clear. Does that make sense to anybody?
From what is voted at town meeting, and I want to stress there are items that town meeting does not vote that have a budgetary impact. For example, we pay amounts toward assessments the state incurs on us. We have to do a number of offset things, which these are monies that show up as revenue but go directly into budgets. Also, the overlay money we set aside to cover abatements and exemptions is another big item.
Right.
But in terms of what is voted at town meeting or the general fund using the tax levy, the 3 items in this warrant relevant to that are 1, the operating budget, 2, Article 17 for the contractual, and 3, that small amount in the capital.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I don't know if that means a lot to anybody else, but
Yeah,
I'm really
and please be aware that the estimated cost of the settlements is already included in the financial projections that I have provided in the past. That's why that number is different than the number in Schedule A.
Oops.
Can we vote on Article 7?
Wait a minute. Wait.
Okay, go ahead.
On Article 6, something stands out to me, and that is spending $480,000 to knock down the old police station. Can't that be deferred to next year?
We're on Article 7.
Yeah, we didn't do it, but we didn't do 6.
We skipped it. We're going to go back to it, Lou.
Okay.
So Article 7, are we ready to vote on Article 7?
Yes.
Everything that you said, Beppy, I don't understand all aspects of that, but I think what I do really feel is important is that we are trying to get a total picture on what this is to the town. And I don't think that the town meeting members understand the ins and outs of what's in there and what isn't. And I think we should be responsible for explaining that to them. I agree with you. So, all right.
You're muted, Beppy.
Article 7, ready to vote? All in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? None. Perfect. Okay, 9-0. Let's look at the language.
Whoops.
Article 7. That's pretty much it.
To the point.
Yeah. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay. So Article 8.
We gotta skip that, don't we?
Skip it.
Skip it?
Yeah,
I think
Please.
So,
that's a whole,
That's a whole night.
we gotta have a,
Can
we gotta have a final
can we-
Schedule A to do that one.
Can we do 9? Greg, are we ready for that? Or do you?
Yes, 9 is done.
So 10 we have to wait on, but 9 we can
Well,
do.
you don't need to wait on, 8 you don't need to wait on, but okay. So 9 is done.
Okay. So 9 is funding sewer and septic system betterments to see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of $1,193,096 from sewer betterment revenue to cover the FY 2021 debt service and associated fees. And to see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of $54,280 from septic system betterment revenue to cover the FY 2021 debt service and associated fees on Title V septic system betterment loans, and to concurrently authorize the town accountant to make the necessary adjustments to each applicable special assessment fund for the various projects and loans. So let's move that article.
so moved.
Bob,
Second.
second Gloria, and discussion. Everybody feel,
How much is the betterment revenue per year in the sewer, this is the enterprise fund revenue, right? right.
Greg, that's,
It is enterprise fund revenue, yeah.
How much is the
Well,
enterprise
let
fund
me
revenue?
rephrase that. The septic betterments are not enterprise. That's separate, but the sewer betterment revenue is part of the enterprise.
And how much is the revenue estimated to be that they're looking to spend from?
I would not have that number in front of me, but I can tell you the number that we have here is there is adequate revenue to provide for it.
Okay. I don't know what to say to that. You're saying because of prior knowledge, you know that the revenue is enough to cover it?
Well, we're legally obligated to pay for this, but what we do is we base they do a betterment based on the borrowing. So the borrowing is done in accordance with we do the calculations of what the betterments are based on the actual what it's going to actually cost us.
I don't follow any of that. Is this coming out of revenue or borrowing to what they want to spend?
This is paying for betterments.
Yes.
Okay?
And
So
where's the money coming from?
it's assessed on people's tax bills. So it goes on their tax bill as a betterment.
Yeah, I mean, what it comes down to is if you have a sewer installed in front of your house, they're going to put the sewer in, they're going to hit you with an assessment, and you have to pay that assessment over a period of time.
And that's all done in the enterprise fund? It's not on the tax, it doesn't go into the general fund at all, it goes through the enterprise fund, those assessments?
Well, it actually goes through a special revenue fund, but it's attached to for the sewer, it's attached to the sewer fund, but it's a special revenue fund that it goes through.
So the town,
Right, but it doesn't,
the town borrows the money to pay for the improvements, and they assess the betterment to the residents. The residents pay the town back, but the town's paying the loan.
yeah, okay.
So the amount of the betterment is done to reflect what the cost of going out for debt services. It's not exact, because what will happen, for instance, is someone may want to pay the whole betterment at once, and even though they have that decision at the beginning of a betterment as to choose whether or not to pay it at once or whether to pay it over a period of time, but at any time they can pay it off. If they pay it off, then then we no longer we no longer are charging them interest into the future, even though we still have the debt service out.
Okay, so,
However, there are administrative fees on this, so ultimately it's pretty close in terms of what we get in revenue and what we're spending out in expenditure.
so
And
the
if
warrant
there
is,
is-
the warrant is saying they expect to get $1,193,000 of betterment revenue, and then they want to use it. They want to use it for this
Yeah.
purpose. Okay.
And
yeah, fine.
sometimes there are slight surpluses and slight deficits, and should that be the case, then it would be
Yeah.
incurred by the sewer fund. But again, all the betterments are done based on assumptions in accordance with debt schedules. So,
Yep.
so the numbers should be pretty equal to one another.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Just to be clear, this is a charge to people who use the town's septic system, not for people who have their own.
It's not, the people that have a septic system are not included in this. So if people are,
Thank you. Just want to I want to clarify. Thank you.
Let's be clear here. People who go through this low interest program for septic are included here. So this does include septic for this special program that allows residents to get money to put in a septic at very low interest rates.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, enough on that.
Okay.
Let's vote.
We ready to vote? All in favor? Okay, everybody good? You good, Bob? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, 9-0. And the language is,
It's coming, it's coming.
yep,
Hmm.
so basically what we just said.
Yes.
You good
Sure.
with that?
Thank you.
Okay, the next 5 articles are enterprise articles, and we're not ready to vote those, right, Greg?
You
You're gonna
do
be
not
working on
have
them?
complete indirect numbers. There are many variables, many different sources of info I have to get. I'm having trouble getting a few.
Yep, we got that email. And how about the senior social day? Is that an enterprise?
That is true as well. The same info
Okay.
I need for the others.
So then, before we go to 16, I want to take a break because I see Deb Wender is with us. And there was a question that came up. Brian, do you want to talk about the grant that you had asked about? And let's have a quick discussion about that.
I really don't know much more about it other than I received a phone call.
Yeah,
from a
everybody
neighbor.
doesn't know it though, so tell everybody. I think only you and I and a couple people, the finance committee doesn't know about it yet.
I'm sorry, what do you want me to?
That you got a phone call.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, so I got a phone call from a neighbor talking about a grant that they thought the state had made for $80,000 to study the feasibility of putting a marina over at Dias Landing, which is next to the bucket, I think. And the neighbor said that part of this was that the town of Dartmouth, if they wanted to collect that 80, had to contribute $16,000. So it was a feasibility study to find out whether a marina should go in there or not and what the benefit to the town might be. And the neighbor suggested that since it was done before the coronavirus, that the money was still available. And he also told me that apparently the select board had voted 5-0 that this was a good idea and that the town should go ahead with it, and that there would be money made available from some fund within the town, the 16 grand, to get the remainder from the state to carry on with this feasibility study. So
Yep.
I had mentioned it to Terry just to see if anyone if we knew about it, and apparently nobody, well, Terry didn't know about it and I didn't. So that's as far as I know, except that I threw in my 2 cents, which was in these uncertain times, it might not be bad to see if there were other sources of revenue for the town from a marina, if it was.
So we had a couple questions for Sean and for Greg, and then Deb, who is the person that does grants for the town, chimed in. So I'll turn it over. Who would like to speak to that next?
Well, very quickly, I think it would help if you went to the special town meeting Article 2.
Okay,
This is addressed right in Article 2 of the special town meeting. So,
okay, thank you.
not the,
So my question, I guess the proposal was made to fund the 16, because the 16,000 wasn't in the waterways budget, because they never would have anticipated this in their budget preparation. So
well,
the proposal was made for that to be funded through the reserve fund. My concern was, why the reserve fund? Why not some other place? And Greg did have an explanation for that.
So sorry, the original grant that was submitted, it was asked, the state wants to know where it was a 25% match. Where's the money going to come from? So on the grant, it was agreed that it would be from waterways retained earnings. And that was what was submitted, and the select board reviewed it and approved it in waterways. Now it was awarded, and then waterways suggested that to ask the select board if there was another way to finance that 16,000, because it wasn't voted at town meeting to appropriate the 16,000 from retained earnings for the grant. So what the select board said was, well, we'll request that the finance committee fund the grant match, the 16,000, and then we'd have an article at town meeting for waterways retained earnings to transfer the money from retained earnings back to the reserve fund, which alone.
and we have done that in the past, both for water and for social day. We had a van that was mainly being funded by grants for social day. And we took money out of the reserve fund, and then we got it back at town meeting. And a few years ago, you may recall, there was a capital item for waterways, a boat, which had a time limit on it, and you did the same thing. So in order for this to be funded, we would need to take it at this time out of the general fund. The reason why we can't wait is the grant. We need to sign off on the grant now. Both Sean and I are of the strong opinion, as was voted by the select board, that it should ultimately be reimbursed back from waterways, because it is a waterways related expenditure.
Okay, questions? Bob?
Is this marina, is this part of the master harbor plan?
I understand that it is.
Okay.
Okay, that's a good thing.
Greg, when you say that the monies would then come out of, be reimbursed from waterways, at what point would that happen? What's the timetable on that?
Well, it'd have to be voted at town meeting. So it'd be voted during the special town. If you look at Article 2 STM, you'll see the article. So it'd be voted in, if we have town meeting in June, it'd be voted in June.
Because this article is saying that to transfer money from waterways to the reserve fund.
So it'd be done in fiscal 20. It'd be done this year. Assuming we have town meeting, this year.
Right.
June 2nd.
If not, I guess this would be an interesting question. I'm not sure if it would end up going into the fiscal year 21 reserve fund or 21 if it's voted after June, because there is a possibility town meeting may actually not convene until after June. So.
And then to confuse matters, the finance committee hasn't voted yet to transfer the money from the reserve fund.
It needs a reserve fund vote in order to
vote. This is in anticipation of the committee making the vote.
Yeah. Jeff?
Just on my opinion on this would be that I don't think it's a good idea to consider a marina on the inbound side of the Paid Nearham Bridge. I don't think I live in that area. I don't think that it's needed, and it would be a pain in the neck in terms of the traffic with that bridge opening and closing to let boats out. But that's just my own.
Well, it's just a feasibility study, so I mean,
Yes.
they'll want your
Yeah, I
opinion.
got to get into that business. $80,000 feasibility study. I got to get into that business. I'm
Well,
retired, I could do something like that.
It's 80,000 in total, 16 for us. And I think,
Yeah.
to me, it's worth exploring whether or not it makes sense economically, simply because it would mean more revenue for the town, jobs, whatever.
Okay, any other comments, Gloria?
All right, I'm sorry, I just need a further explanation. I'm okay with this, I just need to understand the timeline. So this special is taking the money from waterways to the reserve fund. And then at one point, it's gonna go back to waterways?
No, you're gonna, so the article assumes that the finance committee voted, say, next meeting, to transfer from the reserve fund to waterways, or to however the grant account, to compensate for the 25%. So say you voted for that next week, and then, okay, waterways would need to reimburse you from retained earnings for the reserve fund. So that is what would be voted.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I can put shells on my table, Gloria, and show you the shell game that.
Deborah, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
Nope, that covers the details on the finances and what's going where when.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for attending.
My
All right. Do you want to just vote this article then, and that we kind of, we don't have to open up a special, right? We can vote them in any order we want.
Yeah, you can
Greg?
vote any way you want. You can
Yeah, I
vote
mean,
it,
if we're on the-
although I would you will have to do a reserve fund vote at some time, obviously, because whether it's this meeting or the next one, because it's.
In what article would it be put?
It's number 2 on the special town meeting.
It's number 2 on the special town meeting.
I didn't realize we were going to that, but I did know that we were going to have a discussion. Would you like to do the reserve fund vote while we're on the topic and vote this article while we're on the topic, or would you like to come back to it? What's your pleasure?
Yeah, I'd like to talk to some people
Okay,
before I vote.
okay. Well, then let's just delay it. And we've discussed this already, and we'll come back.
I have a question on the delay. Does anybody actually know when the grant expires? In other words, the state, because I understand it's been floating around for a while.
Deb can probably best answer that.
So we have a pre-contract information we need to get to the state. And I asked about the timing of that. And Ellen Sabula, who's in charge of that program, said that if we wanted to use any of the funding for fiscal year 2020, she needed it yesterday. But if we don't anticipate using any funds until fiscal 2021, which would be July 1st, then it could be sometime in July. I don't anticipate we'll be drawing down any funds because we have to complete some paperwork. We have to complete a contract with the state. And then we also need to go out and decide who the consultant will be and enter into that contract. So that will take a little bit of time. So I don't anticipate any monies actually being needed until fiscal 2021.
I'm sorry, I missed it. Until when?
Agree with that.
I missed what you said at the end.
I don't anticipate that the town would need any funding for this project until fiscal 2021. So we have some time before we need to submit the paperwork to the state.
Okay. So we can delay until next week, it looks like, right? Okay. All right, so let's go back to, it looks like we're on Article 16. Are we ready to vote that, Greg? Do we have the information? I know that this is a template from last year.
No, that is not done, so you cannot.
It's not done.
That's the only article that does, yeah, that's not done. So,
How about 17?
well, these numbers are done. However, there may be another union added, so you can vote this, but be aware that you may be adding another union depending on what occurs. So Sean might be able to fill you in more.
Okay, if that's the case, then we're on, oh, Janine, yep.
I just want to, can I ask a question about Article 16?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know these come up every year at town meeting, and every year we seem to give them an extra $1. Is this covered under some kind of contract or union, or are we just bumping them up $1?
Good question. Do you know, Greg?
These are Schedule E employees. None of them are union. They're all part-time, temporary type workers. This is mainly bringing them up to minimum wage. Mainly, that's what we're doing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Or I should say, bringing them up to minimum wage, or in a lot of cases, when you bring someone up to minimum wage, the person above them, it has impacts as you know, because it establishes a new base. So
These are all above minimum wage.
These aren't minimum wage. What minimum wage are you following?
Sounds like what people are asking for. We need 50.
The impacts here are mainly due to minimum wage. Again, if you have a certain employee who goes to minimum wage, then another employee, it has impacts in terms of their level to another employee. So,
Greg, is there a town minimum wage? Is the town voted in a minimum wage at some point?
No, we use the state minimum wage, and they've
And
been
what-
increasing that up until they've been phasing that in up till $15. So
What is it?
So the fact that we're doing $13 an hour, we are not meeting minimum wage. Is that what you're saying? I'm confused.
No, we are. I think these are based on, as the minimum wage goes up, a lot of these hourly rates are based, they're not based on minimum wage, but the lower levels are based on minimum wage. So as the minimum wage rises, they all rise kind of the same
But,
amount.
and they rise, but we don't meet what is now the state's definition of minimum wage.
well, we do meet the state's definition of minimum wage, but they've been phasing it up every year, and I think eventually it will it'll be $15.
You mean
Okay,
Tell me,
putting it
if the
up-
minimum wage goes up 10%, then everybody goes up 10%, even if you're above minimum wage? Is that what you're saying?
Sounds like it.
The reasons for these increases are to do with minimum wage, and again, certain employees are a slightly higher step above others, so it has impacts on those employees. The reason for these increases is because they're trying to keep the distance between those employees the same.
So for instance,
Right.
Greg, tell me if
I
I'm,
think the answer is yes, Jeff.
Yeah,
So
right.
so Greg, as an example, for instance, if we use lifeguard currently at 13. So I would think the gatekeeper, or there's someone lower than lifeguard, correct?
Yeah, these numbers you see here, these aren't this year's numbers, but yes, again, as one employee goes up, they want to keep the differentiation between that and other employees. So it has an impact on all our lower level employees because they're trying to keep the ranges consistent among those employees.
So part of the confusion that people have is that the numbers aren't correct. When the numbers are correct, it'll.
Yeah, this
it'll make
I
sense.
put here, I said below is from last year.
Yep.
So these aren't even the numbers you're voting on.
Yep,
And let's not
What are
vote.
we talking about?
let's not vote. Okay, that's a deal. Gloria?
Can I just ask one more question? Is the state's minimum wage $15 an hour?
It's going to $15
No, not right
per
now.
hour.
It's going to
It
be.
is going when? Next year?
Like 2022 or something like that.
Thank
It's
you.
phasing
Thank you.
in.
So we don't, so to the extent these are the numbers will be real. We will be complying with the state's minimum wage when it's in there. We will be.
I will make sure when I put in the real numbers that I will
Thank
make
you.
it clear which ones are minimum wage and which ones are above minimum wage.
Thank you. Thank you. Great.
Yeah.
All right, so we bypassed the enterprise funds because the indirect costs had not been put in yet. But really, once the indirect costs are in there, it's not going to have a bearing on how we vote. So I'm just wondering why we can't go ahead and vote on those.
Can we vote on something if we don't have the number? That's my only question.
We did that last year.
We voted on them without having the
Because
actual
Greg hadn't had the indirect costs finalized yet, so we voted, if I remember correct, Bob, we
Yeah,
voted,
that's right.
and then we figured, well, if there's a significant change or something comes up, we can always go back to it. But I don't feel it's going to have a bearing on how we vote.
I'm fine with that.
I'm expecting they will go up about 5% because mainly because of pension went up significantly this year. But I'm not expecting any higher than 5 to 10% increases in those numbers. And
A question. Is that you were saying that the indirect costs weren't correct yet? Is it the total amount that's not correct, or is it just the indirect costs and then it'll become the total? And if it's pensions, I don't understand that the indirect costs relate to pensions. Sorry.
Okay, indirect costs. Let me explain what
I know what they are. I know what they are. Okay, go ahead.
Well, we have to pay millions of dollars in pensions per year. So when we pay for an employee who is, when we set
Retired.
aside money each year for pensions,
Right.
and that includes money for current employees for what we're setting aside to cover their pensions in the future. So when we have, say, an employee from the water department, we charge the water department the costs that we pay out for the pension, or estimated costs.
Got it.
Same thing for health care. If we pay for employees' health care in the water department, we charge them for the cost of the health care.
Terry, I don't think we should vote on an article that's not finished.
I agree. And one other thing is, how realistic are the revenue numbers in here?
Ask that question again.
On all the enterprise funds, it always turns out that the revenue is equal to expenses. And I'm not sure if that's just because you make them that, and that may be fine. You're just trying to show that it'll cover itself, but we don't really know if the fees are X for
those revenues, and again, we did this in accordance with what was recommended by the Department of Revenue Division of Local Services. This is based on their template, but those revenues show enough to cover the expenses.
They are not based on what the real fees and
those
total
are not the real revenue numbers. Those are the numbers that we're showing that we have adequate revenues to cover the proposed expenditures. And we have to, when we file something called the recap with the state, and maybe one day I'll share that with you, but we have to show the state that we are balanced. We have to show them that the revenues match the expenditures.
Got it.
What we're doing here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I don't think we should vote either. Thank you.
So we're not going to vote the enterprise funds. One question that I have for these funds, Greg, because sometimes people think that the enterprise fund is different than the rest of our budget. And I want to make sure that there are no new positions in these enterprise budgets.
That is not correct. In the sewer, there is a requested position, a new position in the sewer budget, which the DPW director considers to be essential.
Okay, so I'm going to make a note of that, and we'll discuss that.
Other than in the sewer, there are no new positions being requested in these enterprise funds.
Okay. Is that okay with everybody? We'll pick up later on. I'm going to turn it over to Gloria now because I can't participate in Article 18 discussion.
Okay, Article 18.
I'll make a motion to approve Article 18.
Second,
You're muted, Gloria.
That would help. Sorry about that. Any discussion on Article 18?
It's just straightforward.
Well, I just want to say I did have a question for the group, because what we heard was from the planning board. What we didn't hear was, and I don't recall when David Hickox came to speak with us, did he talk about this at all with us?
No, I don't think he did.
so,
I don't think so. I don't think so. He did. So really, because the planning board really couldn't tell us, other than the fact that there's a new map, what the ramifications are of this new map. So I did read David Hickox's letter. Well, not his letter, but the letter the DEP sent to him. And I mean, basically, this is a requirement he's being asked to put together. The requirement was, I guess he submitted a permit, and then they did a technical review, and they came back with a multitude of questions for him. And so one of the questions they ask is, the previous 3 wells, where they're located, if the map of the 2 new wells is significantly different than the previous 3, then they would have to create a new aquifer protection district. So because the new map is significantly different, they're now being required to put together this map. So the question I would have is, what is the ramifications of having a significant difference to the aquifer protection district? And that's not something the planning board could really answer.
an answer.
I don't know, it seems that if it's including the flood zone, flood plan, that would increase some people's home insurance.
Thought it
No,
was-
that's the next article, Lou. This
That's
is
the next
Article
article.
18.
Oh, excuse me.
Who can answer that question, Gloria?
I guess it would just be David Hickox. It's his, he's the one his department is the one that's being, who went through the technical review, and they have a litany of questions they have to answer within 180 days.
Well, we can ask Dave for some clarification. I mean, I'm sure he's happy to do that.
Okay.
I could see if he wishes to be available for Tuesday's meeting. It seems like you may want to ask him a question on the new position as well.
So we're gonna table this? We're gonna table this?
Well, I just have more questions. I mean, if you're all comfortable voting, fine. I just wouldn't be able to vote on it myself.
Yeah, we'll just table it.
No,
Okay.
we should get clarification.
All right, I guess that's 18 then. Terry, you're back.
I'm back. Article 19 is the amendments. This is the one that Lou was just talking about, the amendments to the floodplain district. And I will say, Lou, that I did ask Christine, I don't remember if it was in a meeting last week or in another conversation, what impact will this have on the residents? The only impact will be that there are some people who have flood insurance who will no longer require it. There will be nobody who doesn't require it right now, and then will, because of this, will require it. So it's only people who have it, so it's a benefit, basically. People who require it now may not require it in the future, depending on where they live.
I think
Are
they
there any,
talked about that.
does somebody want to move this? I'm sorry, somebody should move this to discuss it.
I'll move it.
Adam, second.
Second.
Janine, great, okay. So discussion on this, Gloria?
Can someone just summarize, because I'm sorry, I just found last week a little bit confusing. Can someone summarize exactly, why we have this article? simply. Because I was trying to write a record.
You want to give it a try, Beppy, and then I'll try to fill in?
No, I don't. I really don't.
I think I can add a little bit.
Thank you.
My understanding was that minor changes to the flood zone, and they were updating the language that's required by the Department of Environmental Protection. In other words, our language is not adequate for the Department of Environmental Protection, and that if we don't pass this, then people who need flood insurance won't be able to get it.
That my understanding was that also that FEMA has updated their maps. Our maps don't comply with FEMA maps. And so in order for that compliance to happen, and our environmental coordinator, Mike O'Reilly, has been involved in this process. So it's been reviewed by him, and it is bringing the maps into compliance, basically. And it is urgent because FEMA has not allowed an extension. They wrote a letter to the planning board and said,
Right.
It's got to be done. We don't care that there's a pandemic, get it done. So it's a map correction.
Thank you.
Yes.
To add to that, so FEMA said that it has to pass by July 8th, but if we don't have a town meeting, and many towns don't have a town meeting, then they're still saying tough break.
Nice.
You're out of luck, which makes no sense. But that was the letter they sent out, which we were very surprised. So we'll see.
I suspect the increasing rise in sea level going to make some significant changes to floodplain.
Thank you.
You live
Any
near a
other
swamp.
questions? Any other questions on that?
No.
Okay, so ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor? Good.
I got it, yeah.
Are you,
Yeah, I'm good.
you're good? Okay. 9-0. Let's take a look at the language.
I don't think I wrote anything.
Okay. Well, because it was confusing. It was a confusing process. So we'll work on this and.
Well, wait a second. What did is it 19? Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously you see that it's highlighted because these are just notes from last week. What do you want to say, folks?
I think it's basically to get in compliance.
Right.
I don't know how to say it right, but.
I wouldn't say it would lessen regulations. I think it's intended to bring Dartmouth maps into compliance with FEMA's maps.
Right.
Yeah. Good point.
We have to vote on this. Amazing.
Planning board should have given us the language for this.
Yeah, I thought they,
True.
They did. They sent out. But it was not concise. So let me see if I can find it.
Terry,
Yes.
I think whatever you draft, you may want to run it by both Christine and Mike O'Reilly to make sure it's accurate enough, just because FEMA is very much a stickler on it, and just to be sure. That's what I would just suggest that.
All right. So let's, can you make a note here? Great. And then we'll do that work before the next meeting.
With Mike O'Reilly?
I will, yeah, I talked to Mike about it because I couldn't understand it. And I have notes, so I'll go through and revise this.
Okay.
Yeah, you may want both he and Christine to take a look at it.
Okay. We'll do that. Thanks, Deborah. I appreciate it. Okay. Article 20. Is this being withdrawn, Greg?
not that I've heard. It was talked about, but no, there has been no information they've actually withdrawn it. So I will have to assume for now it's still on.
And I don't remember
21.
that coming up last week. Does that, am I blanking on that?
She discussed it was minor, minor
Okay.
adjustments to
lighting.
the
It was,
language.
it was suggested at the select board
exciting.
meeting, but they never got back to us to say they were withdrawing it. So
Okay.
That was submitted by the planning board.
I make a motion to move this article.
Second.
Second, Bob. So Gloria and then Bob.
I thought this was the one they said could go to the October meeting if the spring meeting was delayed or something. Somebody asked that question.
Right, there's been, but
Sean
Greg's saying
did.
it
I
wasn't.
think Sean did, but again, unless they withdraw it, we have to hear it, so.
There was a little bit of discussion. I think the planning board's preference was just to include it. I mean, we went back and forth about trying to pare down the number of articles, but you can see most of them were required. So this would be one that was one extra. So why not just include it?
Wasn't this the article that a few years ago just got ridiculous at town meeting? It went on and on and on.
Yeah. I think so.
For an hour and a half.
So what I recall she said last week was that they just found some small errors in the language and that this was just to clean that up.
I think that's right.
You think so too, Janine?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
changing
I do
that.
too.
You
Yeah.
want to vote for it?
Yes.
Okay. So all in favor?
Wait, I can't find my thumb.
Okay. So that's 9-0. And the language is, the article provides for minor revisions to the current sign bylaw. This is going to be a very short support. We like it. We like it.
End of
You
the
want to
town
add
meeting.
anything else?
No, why? You know,
Exactly.
we'll just keep it simple.
Good to be to the point.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Plus,
number
God only
20
knows what revisions they're really adding. I wouldn't even be able to tell you.
Ones that
Number
seem the
21.
simplest are the ones that get talked about the longest at times.
I know.
21.
21.
Marijuana.
Here we
Marijuana.
go.
Zoning bylaw, expanse of certain recreational marijuana operations into general business. So this is to see, and this came up in the spring. I'm
I
sorry.
move
in
to
the
approve.
fall.
I move it.
It was at the somebody gonna move it? Who's gonna move it?
Kathy.
Beppy. Second, Janine. You got that, Greg? Beppy and then Janine. So it came up in the spring, and what was confusing in this, what was confusing in the fall was that the law was new. It hadn't been tested. It seemed like nobody was saying that it was a bad zoning that had been in place. And so many people on the committee felt like, well, why are we changing it? Then there was another potential amendment thrown into the mix about switching the license to the select board instead of the planning board. It got very convoluted. And as a result, it was not supported. Now, here we are with the same proposal, a little bit different. Again, changing, it's for, it's not for recreational or retail. It's for
Station.
say it again.
Cultivating and manufacturing.
And packaging, and it's to move it to the general business district. And one thing that's different in my mind is that now people are saying, the planning board, when we spoke to Christine, that her thought, and she didn't say this in the fall, but now she is feeling that the existing zoning is not the best location for this business, that there are just not enough options given the way that it's zoned. That's new information for me. I don't know what other people feel about this. Any other
Sorry, could you clarify
questions?
that? So what did Christine say?
That the existing zoning that's in place for this purpose is insufficient for a business. There aren't enough good locations in that area. She didn't say that last year. She wasn't sure. She hadn't vetted that in the same way. And now she does feel like it's not the best zoning possibility for these businesses.
Yeah, the overlay district as it exists it's not that large. So to have retail and manufacturing in there, but this article still allows manufacturing and cultivation in the overlay district. It just expands the ability to have manufacturing and cultivation in the general business district. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, and I think the planning board has like ultimate authority over where something goes or doesn't go. So, I think we should just get through this, and because there's even though I don't agree with marijuana, there is a lot of revenue source here. And so I think it's just something, it's just like the first step. And personally, I think we just ought to get over it and prove it.
Okay, Beppy and then Janine.
Just in terms of the buzzsaw we ran into, or the town ran into whenever it was. Where's the select board on this now before, do you know? Because it would be ridiculous if we go back into the same mess. Excuse me, but.
They're sponsoring it.
Yeah.
So
They are sponsoring this time?
Yeah.
they've sponsored this article. It's not a planning board article.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
And the
Thank you.
finance committee in October voted against it. What was the vote? Does anybody remember the vote?
No, we did. That's what I just said, Jeff.
was-
We voted against it and the
It's
reason.
like
why.
5-4.
Janine, what were you going to say?
Never mind.
Janine? You're good? Okay.
I think it was like 5-4. No,
Right.
yeah.
I remember, Bob, I remember you were
5-4.
saying that the
I
company
actually
that was
voted
trying to
for
get,
it. I
the
voted
company that
for
was
it,
trying to
voted
get
against
in they made calls to everyone on the town meeting, like the night before, to see if
They
they.
did.
Yeah.
They did. It was.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like John Kerry, but I actually voted for it before I voted against it, because the night before at 9:30 at night I got a call for them,
Right.
you know, and I was like, you got to be kidding me, you know,
Right.
to vote for it. So.
It's hard to sort out the reasoning on this article because you have your personal feelings, you have new law
Right.
that hasn't been tested and tried. But for the reasons that I said, last year I voted against it because I didn't hear that there was a problem with the existing zoning. Nobody could say that there was a problem with it, and it hadn't even really been tried. But now I am hearing that there aren't enough options in that area and that this would allow more options, and it's only one license for this purpose that we'll be giving, right? Is that correct,
Yes, the town only has one.
Gloria?
Sean, maybe you can answer this, because last year, I just want to know what the difference is between last year, the fall's language and this language. Because in the fall, I have the article in front of me and I'm still trying to figure out the difference. It was a resident petition
Yes.
last
So-
fall.
Yes. So last year it was the amendment to the amendment to the amendment. So last year it was a resident petition, but the wording in the petition article was not substantial enough. So the town council looked at it and with the planning board, and they proposed an amendment in order for the wording to be proper enough to be voted on. So that was the amendment. So there was an amendment to the petition article, and then the select board wanted another amendment so that the select board would have the authority. So this is similar to that. Well, not with the select board does not have the authority to grant the special permit. That's what they wanted. This does not have that. It's really just to allow manufacturing and cultivation in the general business district.
But they still need a special permit,
Yes.
right?
In
You can't just go anywhere without a permit.
No, correct. I mean, some of the logic is, there's a lot of existing buildings in the general business district that could be used. Not a lot, but a fair amount. Whereas in the overlay district currently, there's not a lot of businesses that can be reused for this purpose.
And it would be the planning board the planning board would be the one to issue the permit, right?
Yes.
I assume.
Yes. And the select board would issue the host community agreement. So the planning board issues the special permit. Part of the host community agreement is that there be a special permit issued.
This is the
Gloria?
same.
I don't
Gloria,
know.
and then-
I don't to this question if it's Sean or Greg, but what is the appetite right now for this type of business? I mean, I know someone just said there's money in it, but is there truly money? Is this something that we just think there's money? What is the appetite? Greg, Sean, do you know?
For the retail or for manufacturing?
Manufacturing and cultivating.
I think there's a lot of revenue out there. I mean, it's just like any market, it's new. So once it gets saturated, things could change. A lot of people are focusing on this Casco because they had identified the tennis club, but this article would allow them to pursue that, but it doesn't mean that they would get the host community agreement. Someone could still come in and say, for the same manufacturing purpose, and say, we want to manufacture in the overlay district. And the revenues depend on the size of the facility. So, and how much that they are growing and manufacturing, but it can be substantial. I mean, I think you're seeing around whenever you look up things or read things, the revenue has been significant. So, we're trying to get that established too. We currently have a retail company that wants to come in, they're going to come before the board on the 4th now, May 4th, for a host community agreement for retail. And I think, they're looking pretty promising.
So to clarify, there can only be one?
One manufacturing and cultivation, correct.
That's it. Okay.
Adam?
Oh, I don't have much to add. I was saying this is the same. So this is basically the same article that was on the fall. I wasn't confused about it in the fall. Town meeting voted against it. I don't have much to say. This is the same. This is one of these things where we can't talk about an individual project that we all know that's what it is. I don't know. Nothing's changed from the fall to me. There's still land in the marijuana district. I talked to builders over there. This is a more convenient spot at the tennis facility, but it's not the only spot. It's just cheaper for this developer. So I don't know. I don't like the idea of the town changing the entire general business district for one particular entity, but that's all I have to say.
Well, I can only say to that, Adam, it depends how you look at it. They're not doing that. So if this were to pass, and then the town, we wanted to issue a host community agreement for manufacturing and cultivation, we would advertise that and request proposals from, a public. So 5 companies could come in and say, we all want to have a manufacturing and cultivation license with the town. And some of them may be in the overlay district. They may say, we're in the overlay district, and, they provide a better offer than this tennis club. And that's why we're trying not to talk about the tennis club, because even if
I know, I understand that. I just think, if the proprietors or the facilitators of the Casco is already working or already speaking directly with the select board, then I just feel like it's a done deal. If we pass this, that's where it's going to go probably.
The tennis
I know, I
club is going to
understand
make
the
a
process,
deal.
but let's be realistic.
The tennis club is making a deal with the town to pay the 3% tax that's on retail. They were going to pay it on the wholesale, which was $500,000 a year for the town. That's why that deal was good. I voted for it.
We should make anyone who comes in do the 3%.
Well, yeah, if you can get
we do. And I'll tell you, we've had other interests from other companies looking to do manufacturing and cultivation in town. So
and pay the 3%.
I wasn't here last year, so I'm a little confused about what we're even talking about. Could somebody just summarize what the difference was between October and now?
How about if I call you tomorrow and I'll give you the background? Okay, I'll do that.
Well, in order for him to vote, he would need to know tonight, wouldn't he?
Okay, I'll give it a try. So last year, it was a residence petition that was presented by the people who wanted to develop. It's a location on Route 6, the tennis courts.
Yep.
You know where that is?
Yeah.
By the ledge? Okay. So somebody thought, what a great place for me to build my manufacturing business. And they presented it in that way. So they came to town meeting. They did as Bob said, they really did a full out contact all the town meeting members. And then in the process of the town meeting conversation, it got very confusing because there was an amendment to that petition and another amendment to the petition. The finance committee stood up and that night on the amendments. We weren't even prepared for it. So it was very confusing. And for myself, the reason that I did not vote in favor of it was what I said. We had a zoning law that was brand new, that hadn't been tested. There, nobody had gone out and located a business or found a potential place to put a business. It seemed like that's what the planning board thought would be good. And the planning board director said she couldn't say that there weren't enough appropriate locations there. So in my mind, that's why I voted for it. What do other people remember from that? Adam talked about why he did.
Yeah, it sounds like a good summary.
Yeah, well, that was a good summary. There was confusion because of the separate amendment from the select board. I think that added a whole shift to it where everybody got confused what was going on because it looked like the boards weren't agreeing.
Yeah.
I can read what we did last year, what we wrote. We did not recommend 4-3. The committee, the finance committee did not recommend this article. The committee was concerned about expanding manufacturing and cultivation of marijuana outside of the established overlay district into the general business district so soon after the original overlay district was established? Because that had just been established the previous, what year?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Okay,
So Brian, basically what this does is it expands where they can put a manufacturing facility from Fonts Corner to Route 6.
so do we want to vote?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in favor, no, 7 in favor and 2 against. Is that correct?
Should
2
be
against,
9
okay.
Should be 9 altogether.
Yep, so 7 in favor, 2 against.
2 against, right?
Yep. And you want to take a look at the language?
Okay.
Do we want to explain why we voted? Does somebody want to add the kind of minority opinion on this?
Adam, that's you and I. Well, I just kind of feel the same. I have the same feeling I did last time. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, no, I just, like I mentioned, I don't think anything's changed. I think there needs to be, I mean, or do we need to put do we do it like a majority opinion? Like that just says what we do.
You don't have to, it's not really a
Okay.
close vote, and I don't know
Yeah.
if we'll be questioned. We've been questioned when it's a close vote, but
I just like to add that, and this is my feeling, that the finance committee feels that that there are enough controls.
Yeah.
Finance committee feels enough controls granted to the planning committee or planning board to ensure the safety and security of the town residents.
that's a good point.
I can't speak for the minority, but you may want to say the majority of the finance committee.
Okay, yeah, okay. I mean, that's
Great. We might have time to do Article 22 and then just talk briefly about the cover letter before we finish. Want to keep going?
sure.
So Article 22, this was the zoning single residence to general business. Somebody want to move this?
I'll move it.
Bob, second?
Second.
Epi seconded it. Okay, discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, because the planning board voted against this, and I'm always reluctant to vote against the planning board because they're the experts. But I thought the attorney did an excellent job of offering all these concessions on ensuring that no box stores would go in and things like that. And I also thought that Stephen Taylor, who voted for it, also talked about the expenses of putting apartment buildings in there if we didn't do something like this. So I'm in favor of it.
Other thoughts?
I thought we were sending this back to the planning board, this one.
Well, we kind of gave that message, but we still have to make a decision on it because we're asked to. The only thing that I thought about with this is I kind of felt bad that we don't have. I wish we had a resource for residents, some kind of like a resource bureau for people who, because we've had a couple of these situations where people have put together a residence petition, and it hasn't panned out because they didn't have correct wording, and they really can't go to our attorney and ask for help. That makes sense to me. But on the other hand, for an average person to try to get something like this done, it would be nice if there were some sort of resource available to them to help,
Yeah.
you know, with the,
I agree with that.
Secretary Christine O'Grady and I have talked about this, and I think what she does is she tries to encourage the applicant to come before the planning board, to have the planning board propose the article, and work with the planning board on the wording. And that way, if the applicant comes in and the planning board supports it, then they'll work on sponsoring the article, and then town council can review it and create the wording that works. I think some of the issues are people are in haste to kind of come in with a petition article to get it done as soon as possible. But it also relies, the flip side is it relies on the planning board to want to sponsor it as well. So if the planning board is not interested, then the onus, you're right, is on the petitioner.
Janine?
I had the impression that they were considering withdrawing this and doing what Sean just said, going back to the planning board and reworking it, because as it stands right now, and I did listen to the planning board meeting, and of course, I was at our meeting, so I've heard it discussed, at length. And I don't believe there's enough details provided other than a verbal promise. And to me, I don't make a decision on a verbal promise.
Plus, how can we approve something the planning board turned down? I don't see how we do that.
We can, because we're a separate body, but we don't like to. We don't like to.
Yeah, I mean, if they turned it down, what basis are we going to vote for it on? I just don't get it.
Well, we have done that before, though. I can think of a few things that another board came to us and recommended, and we said no, or vice versa. So do you want to wait on this and see if they decide to withdraw it, Lou?
Well, I just read it again, and basically what it's trying to do is something like, when they did the high school, they had a couple of empty lots there that were contaminated from prior activities, the same kind of dump thing. And here and now, the problem is they find out that there's stuff buried underneath from a former dump where they dumped anything, crap. And so they're looking to see if marijuana income could be the stabilization fund.
No, we're on number 22.
I am. Read the first paragraph under Bliss Corner Stabilization Fund.
No, we're on Article
Oh, you must be
22.
working on an old warrant.
Oh, page 4. This is the Lou. This is the discussion that we had with the planning board, where the property owners have an empty lot and they want to build a solar farm. But in order to build the solar farm, they have to have it rezoned from single residence to general business. And the planning board, 4-1, didn't support it. So I guess my question for you is, do you want to wait and see if they withdraw this? Do you want to make a decision tonight?
They were going to, feeling they were going to go back to the plan. They were going to try to get this, I don't know, this letter or covenant saying they were going to, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I feel like we were like, go for it, do that, because it felt like their neighbor, the owners are the people who live next door. They don't want a development there either. So I was trying to figure, I thought there was going to be another step. So I wonder if we can defer it for a week and go back to the planning board and see where they stand on this, and if they're going to try to rethink. Because if they rethink it, I'd love to be supportive of this.
Right.
Yeah, well, the current
Then
residents didn't cause the situation. The town didn't protect the land, or they gave them building permits on something that was an old dump. So the current residents shouldn't be responsible for that. The town's trying to get out from being responsible.
Could be.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion, and we'll just talk about it later.
Table it.
Can I just say, having done a resident petition in the past, it's very challenging, because once you submit the language and you have a certain time period, a certain window, you have to submit it. Once you submit it, you can't change it. So I really feel for them. They need to be able to go back. So I agree with everyone. They should go back, and we'd rather support them do that. But to your point, though, and Sean, I hope that there is a way that maybe going forward, that when residents, they can have someone to work with. And I know it's difficult, you can't send them to town council, right? But it's just so challenging to submit something and then not have it exactly according to snuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. Christine and I have talked about this. We started talking about this last year with the petition articles for the marijuana, that there were the amendments to the amendments, and, you know, what we try to encourage them, they just need to come in early so that they can get in early in the process. And if it's a zoning issue, work with the planning board.
Well, they hired an attorney. You'd expect if you hired an attorney who's familiar with doing it, that's all you need to do.
It's not the same though, because our town attorney's language, he's very particular, and they're not all the same.
Well, that's the attorney's job, to communicate like that. But this guy was from Taunton, I think, or Rating. He's not even
Well,
from
he was-
Dartmouth.
He was trying to, but you know, I think the point was made that Attorney Savastano didn't feel like it was his responsibility to work for the resident, and that's where I feel for the resident, because I feel like you know, we should be doing something to help our residents, and this is a resident that was trying to get something done. If it's not a good idea, but it seems like everybody thinks it's a good idea, they just couldn't get it done. So, all right, on the cover letter, thank you to Brian and Beppy for putting this draft together. I think it's a great beginning, and it's something that we've been talking about wanting to do for a few years. How would you like to proceed with this? One way would be that you look at your copy, you mark it up, you send it to me, I combine them. I'm willing to do that. That might be easier to do than to try to do this online in front of everybody. But I'm open to whatever you'd like to. I'd like everybody's input. So what are your thoughts?
I think
Beppy?
you should let everyone.
Well, let me just say, first of all, I want to make sure I work with Greg to get the numbers right and make the context right, which is, it's not just the 91 million plus the 12 million or whatever doing for the, and I'll get that part right. At the same time, there are a couple of, I think, important things that we want to get your opinion on in there that are suggesting that things could get pretty bad for the town. And this is really Brian's idea that, and I think I personally think that this is the time the town should maybe, we're going to commit to this budget, but it's with some expectations that we'll know more in the next couple months what the tax revenues are going to really be, and if some people are not going to be able to pay their bills, and we're going to know more whether we're even going to have any revenues in the summer because of things. So it basically is saying, once this thing is passed, let's give ourselves time to and reconsider some things, and once we know more. I think that's what, does this committee agree that this is a tough time and we don't really know, and we have to provide some, to have the town, the select board and the finance committee and the administration work on some what if scenarios of what's going to happen. And it's not just because of the coronavirus, it's also because of Greg's been predicting some concerns about revenues going forward and whether they're going to cover it. So I think it was really, those are the points that are critical. Do you think those are worth saying and presenting to the town, to the select board? This is really going to the select board first. Thank you. And I'm sure Brian has more to say.
No, I really don't. But I think the major point that I wanted to make in all this is, since it's a very fluid situation and that things will be changing from month to month, that what we need to do is keep track of it and see how whatever changes going on are going to affect the generations of revenue and the need for the town to have a balanced budget. So it's nothing more, at least in the start, but to also see how things are going on a month-to-month basis. But then while we're doing that, is to think of options in case things don't go as well as we think they will. And to be able to do a reasoned review prior to a really dire emergency on what the town's options might be. So my recommendation would be, rather than trying to do this online, is everybody mark up what was submitted and give it to Terry. Otherwise, we'll be here till 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I think I've already done that.
Me too.
Right? You got that, Terry?
I haven't. I need
No,
to spend more
I just sent
time.
it directly to, just to Terry, just because it's trying to stay offline. You know what I mean? Open meeting laws. I sent it to you. I think everyone should just send it in, and if you don't mind combining them.
Nope, I don't mind. I don't mind.
So Terry, then what you'll do is try and squish it all together and then send it out again?
Yes, I will. Yes,
And
I
then
will.
we shouldn't wait for the next meeting to comment, or should we, when you put it all together, should we just comment?
Why don't we have
The
a
way
deadline for
I
the,
understand open meeting law is we can't have a group discussion of a quorum or more online. So one or two of us can have a back and forth. That's my understanding, Greg, is that correct? That one or two of us can have conversations, but we can't have a quorum or more because that constitutes a public meeting. So
Right.
yes, send me your stuff, and then if I have questions, I'll send it to you and you can start thinking. But I agree, if you could just, make your notes visible when you do your edits, either in another color or however you do it, so that it will be easy for me to tell what's your change.
Hey, Terry,
when
can
do
I
you
just-
need them
one
by,
thing real
so
quick?
that we can go over at the next meeting?
I'm thinking that, so next week is the 28th and the 30th, we have meetings. On the 28th, we have the school committee, and John has pulled his article, so we're not hearing from him. I guess if you got it to me by Monday, I could do it and send it out to you on Monday for Tuesday. What do you think?
Terry, I converted it to a Word document. I don't know if you want to just do that generally for everyone, because I don't know if everyone knows how to do that, but you can't add comments into a PDF. So I converted it to a Word and then made comments, then send it back to you.
Okay.
I don't think I have the unedited version in Word. But I can do that unless one of the writers wants to do it.
No, I can make it.
Yeah, if you have a Word,
Yeah.
if you have a Word document you can send out, that would be good.
I will do that. Yeah,
save some
I can
time.
do that. Any other comments or?
Oh, so one other point though, Beppy mentioned it, was the idea of somebody verifying the numbers that are in the cover letter.
We're waiting to hear
I
back
will
from
look
Greg.
at them. I will look at them.
Yep. The other thing I want to really ask for your input, because a couple of you have sat through these joint meetings and they can be deadly. It would be great if we could have a productive discussion. The theme that Brian keeps bringing up is hope for the best, plan for the worst. And, originally when I was thinking about this, I had big ideas about doing some strategic planning and maybe looking at some kind of a guidance document. And I think that's going to be too big for us. I think we have to, the idea of doing a quarterly review, I think is doable. I know Greg looks at the budget regularly anyway, but we might have to actually plan a couple of meetings over the summer. The problem is I don't think we're going to have much new information until the middle of the summer. So I'm thinking that we're probably thinking about August by the time we start that, unless things change significantly. But we should know by then what our revenues look like, and we should know what's happening at the state and federal level. There's a lot of information. Brian's done a lot of research, and he sends article after article on what's happening in other states and other, there's just not much happening locally that we can really count on right now. So
Can we just ask, I'm sure Sean and Greg and the select board are hearing and thinking and talking about this, and is there some, what's the and I haven't seen on public television or anything else, anything that suggests, what's the degree of anxiety on the part of the select board at this point about all this?
Yeah, I mean, the same as you all. They're very concerned. Like we talked about in our last meeting with you all, their last meeting as well. Nobody knows what kind of the financial repercussions are right now. We're just kind of in the middle of things, so it's hard to make decisions. We want to be prepared, and we want to keep a close eye on where we're at with estimated receipts. So, and we have the hiring and spending freeze going on right now to kind of prepare for that. So that is where they're at, but we're watching it closely, and until we're able to see some actual numbers, we can't make any significant decisions.
Okay. Question, yeah. Have we furloughed any employees?
No.
Is there any plan to do
No, I
mean,
mean, right now, all staff, we were, like I mentioned earlier, we're business as usual. The departments have continuity of operations plans, and staff are working remotely. Some are coming in if they need to, if they're essential, and all offices are open. So, for until May 4th, that's the current end of the state of emergency, but we'll see what happens then. And, if we have to go longer, we're prepared because we're up and running. So that's the best we can do. Now it affects many other departments like recreation and programming, and you see the schools are closed for the year. So,
Well, maybe one thing that would be of value, and this might be asking way too much, but I think, Greg, you said that next year's budget assumes that all budgeted positions are in fact refilled and they're filled full-time, so that we are not, that in fact, it doesn't include any new positions unless exceptional. But it does assume that even though we have open positions now, we're not filling open positions. The budget for 21 assumes we're going to fill any open positions. Is that true?
We have a hiring freeze, so we're not supposed to be filling any position other than essential positions. So
Okay, but go back. Hold on.
based
But
on
the budget
What?
assumes they are filled. The budget does assume they are filled.
Yeah, but they can't fill them without getting approval. So
Here's my question. If we don't fill them, if we just say we're not going to fill them for the full next year, do we have any idea what that would save? That's all I'm trying to say. We might have to say, let's not fill any open positions for the full year. That's a,
well,
I bet it's significant.
that gets back to that whole issue of which I think we're all in agreement of, we have to monitor this closely, and in the fall, as is written in the spending freeze memo of Sean and myself, we're unlike a normal year where you vote a budget in June and you monitor it and basically don't do too much until next June. In this case, we're reserving the right to go back into the budget in the fall and adjust accordingly. So to the degree we have monies that are unspent due to hiring freeze and all, we can transfer those monies in the fall to other areas where we may need the money.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, take them right out of the budget.
yeah, I mean, I just feel that, like BCC just furloughed a bunch of employees. And I just find it hard to believe that under the circumstances when the schools aren't open, that there's no opportunities to furlough people.
Well, can I just say one thing, and obviously this is a much larger issue, but do keep in mind that we are pay-as-you-go when it comes to unemployment. So whoever we furlough, it's not going to come out free and clear for the town. We will still be on the hook, I believe, for the health and all that. And at the same time, we will be paying additional unemployment. So the way the law works is municipalities are pay-as-you-go for unemployment.
It's why not filling open positions is a little easier. It's not necessarily the best thing, but it's still easier. And
there you don't have unemployment issues, but we will definitely have unemployment issues if we furlough.
Brian?
This is my point about planning ahead of time. So if we could have discussions about furloughing, we would get a lot of these things out in the open for discussion to take action on should we have to, and not wait until, oh my God, we have to figure out where the money's coming from,
right?
Where we have to make cuts. So that was my point, was that be able to have a question, if it's furlough or whatever it is, it keeps the level of service the best we can within the prevailing circumstances,
right,
is what we want to talk about ahead of time, not when we're jammed into a corner. And
And I think what's
that's the
tricky,
point that I wanted to make.
and what's tricky for the finance committee is we are limited. So for example, we're not here right now, but we could at some point be in a position where we have to say, in order to present a balanced budget, we need to cut by 10%. We would not be the people saying, in this department, this person should cut, or we think this department is more essential than that department. We would then turn that over to Sean and Greg to meet with the departments and say, this is the amount that needs to be cut. Figure out what is the best way to do that. And it gets tricky for us because we do have, many of us have professional experience, I think, in this area, and we've had to do it. But we have to recognize that that's the role of the administrator and the business manager. And then we could say at some point in the future, in terms of the hiring freeze, that is going to contribute towards a certain percentage of the budget.
Right.
Right. So,
Right.
okay.
So let me ask another question, and then I'll be quiet. For Greg, to go all through these permutations, do you have the staff to be able to crank out these sort of numbers currently?
I can't, you went in and out.
What I was saying was, if we get into this area where we have to do a whole bunch of different permutations for budgets and what the tax rate will look like, et cetera, do you have the staff to be able to work the numbers and get us the information in a timely manner?
Well, I've already done scenarios. I'm sorry, Bob asked me to do some scenarios. I already did a few, so.
So Brian, if you're
For
talking.
example, I was asked, oh,
Sorry.
I haven't seen them. If you could send them out, I can send them to people, Greg.
But
Thank you.
Bob, who asked?
I just have the percentages, but for example, I assumed how much of the general fund budget we would have to cut if we had a 5% cutback in the items that I listed I thought were most vulnerable. It came out to less than 1%. If it was a 10%, it was 1.4%. So these numbers aren't large right now, and that's largely due to the fact that we are not at this time assuming cutbacks in the tax levy. We are fortunate, unlike the state, which is very dependent on the economy for its revenue. Our number one source, 70%, is the tax levy, and that does not go down during a recessionary period.
Okay.
Good.
Any other comments or questions? Gloria?
I just wanted to say to Brian and Beppy that I really appreciate the letter, because for me, the takeaway I'm hoping that a town meeting member reading this will be is that, okay, there's confidence that we're ending the year, on a positive note, in the sense that we've got it covered, but that there are potential for some downfalls, and that the finance committee is going to watch this closely, on a regular basis, that they're going to come up with a plan, they're going to be meeting with the select board. So I think that was, always my intention, is that we provide them with some kind of letter that says, we're on this, we're watching this closely, giving them some kind of peace of mind in that regard. So for that, I thank you.
And they
Thank
did
you.
it for 4 days.
And I also think it's also important that this is the kind of thing we talk to the select board about.
Thank you.
We're giving them a draft before we even think about sending it to the full town.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the school committee too, they'll be in that meeting. So I think they should both get a copy. Once I get your information back, we'll approve what version goes to both of those for the school committee on the 4th, for the joint meeting on the 4th.
On that note, Terry, you've started saying that some of these meetings are brutal, and they are. Okay, so my number one question is, what's on the agenda? What is our purpose when we meet with them? What do we hope to gain from this? Or is this going to be a wasted evening?
Okay, so let's think about that and let me know what you think.
Yeah, I
Thank
mean,
you.
my experience with the select board is they do all the talking. I don't know what to put it other than that. And it's hard to get a word in with them.
So
and they sometimes they go off on these tangents that, whereas in your case, Terry, when we go off on tangents, you kind of bring us back in. But when the select board goes on tangents, we're not in position to
You know
kind of
what,
rein
with
it
'em.
in.
Well, if you get that letter put together, you could make the letter and discussion of the letter and as with a consensus of everybody on the FinCom, the subject of the meeting.
Yeah, and they do rely on our input. So I have no problem opening up the conversation by saying we want this to be a productive meeting. We don't want to just have this be a reading of the warrant. We want to talk about what we think is important. But what I don't want to be the person to come up with the content. I want you to tell me what we should be talking about. So if you get back to me with your edits on that cover letter and a bullet point of what you think we should be talking about at that meeting, I'll tell you what I think, and we'll come up with a plan before we meet. We have 2 more meetings before that meeting.
So instead of letting them talk, set the agenda before we go in. This is what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we set it up so that we talk about our issues and that we're not sitting there while they're talking to people about getting a license for, a beer license for.
I don't know, Sean. How does that work? Kent?
Generally, now I think we're doing it on the 11th, right? So we can make it so that we'll keep the application.
Are we doing it on the 11th or the 4th?
Fourth.
I thought it was the 4th, but I would rather do it the 11th.
Yeah, I'd rather be the 11th. I
have it for the 11th, in which
Good.
case they can discuss it. So my schedule for them, we're doing our first Zoom meeting on Monday, so it's very light, but it's really just reviewing the list of articles that we've gone over. And then on the 4th, I was going to have them review the articles like you're doing tonight. And then on the 11th, the joint meeting, and then they would vote on the articles in the warrant.
Sean, can I ask you, this is a question about, and Greg, if you know the answer to this, could I possibly do a Zoom meeting with Stanley Mickelson, Chair of the Select Board, and Kathleen, Chair of the School Committee, to pre-plan that meeting? Is that allowed, or is that a problem? It needs posting and all that?
That's not an open meeting.
No, you
So
can do that.
You can do it without any kind of open meeting.
So what I might do then is, after we come up with our letter and after we come up with what our bullet points are, I might ask for a meeting with them, especially if it's the 11th, which would be great. That would be, if you could confirm that, I'd appreciate it, because last I knew I wanted it to be the 11th, but I thought it was decided it was going to be the 4th. So let me know.
I had it as the opposite. So originally I had it as the 4th, and then I think we had a meeting where we had the discussion. It ended up being the 11th. So
Great. Gloria?
So to clarify, schools is part of the 11th as well?
Yes. Yeah.
So just remember, every time that we meet with schools, we always hear the comment that whatever we're discussing that night, they haven't had an ample time to review the information given to them. So we want to make sure this letter, if it's going to schools as well, that they get a good solid, 4 or 5 days to review it?
Yep. Okay.
One other question before will work for you. The bullet points you're talking about are what, as it relates to the meeting with the select board?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So for example, one of the bullet points would be, what are we doing over the summer to plan on monitoring the budget? That would be one of them, I think. How do we decide when we need to make cuts or not? Yeah. All in keeping with that kind of forethought, rather than having a reaction to some of the things that we have to deal with.
So just to be clear, the 4 things we usually go over as a base. One is we go over the operating budget, we go over the capital budget, we go over the warrant, and then we also go over the financial projections. So those are 4 items we typically try to, I should say the 5th one we may touch upon, although I'm probably going to delay it, is any changes to the financial policies. But I think given all that's going on, I'm not suggesting any at this time.
So this is what happens when we have a meeting with the select board. And
Yes.
That's
We-
way too much.
We will typically, we suggest amendments to the financial policies. All of those have to be voted, or we ask to be voted by the Select Board, FinCom, and School Committee. We go over the budget, we go over the capital, we go over, again, the financial projections.
So
Just like an
my
8-hour
thought
meeting?
my thought process on the operating budget, the capital, and the warrant it's self-explanatory. I think that can go to people, they can read it, and then we can say any questions. And I think what we should spend our conversation, what to me would be productive, is financial projections and kind of how do we move forward from here.
I think one thing that's very different here is we did, again, getting back to that spending freeze memo, that was endorsed by both the Select Board and the FinCom. So I'm assuming we're all on the same page in terms of that. So yeah, that may free up time to focus again on what makes this a special year is we're going to have to look extremely closely at the revenues and the expenditures. We do already, but this time we need to be prepared to make changes midway through the year.
Yep, we have to end. We have to end the meeting. But do we know how we're going to have a Zoom town meeting? Is that a possibility, or?
No, we had a meeting this week with the moderator and the clerk and the council, and you know, a Zoom town meeting would be very difficult because you still have to take a vote, and not only communicating, but which is not that hard, but the vote, and it would have to be an individual roll call vote. So for the minimum quorum's 152, but there could be up upwards of 250 there. So
This is where that electronic voting would have been great.
But that only works on site. It's not. Yeah. So what we're doing is, if there's the state of emergency continues through June 2nd, which is when town meeting is supposed to be, then the select board can just postpone or reschedule the meeting to within 30 days of when the state of emergency ends.
Okay.
If there's no state of emergency and we still really can't have town meeting because of social distancing or other issues, then the moderator can continue the meeting, but it would have to open and continue to another date within 30 days. So we met this week and we're meeting again on the 4th, just to kind of see where things are at. But that's
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Does somebody want to move?
Greg, can you and I get together sometime in the next several days to?
Yes, I would love to. I actually was going to ask you for your phone number, but not here. You don't need to give it to me.
Thank you. We'll get together. Thank you.
Okay, Brian, I'll call you tomorrow.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor? Thank you. Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Right.
Night.
See you Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thanks.